So finals are over, school is over, and it's getting kind of chilly here in California. And usually when all of those things combine, it's a perfect time to start reading. So for today's video, I thought I would talk about reading and kind of my strange relationship with reading, being an English major and all. I actually feel that I've accomplished a lot of reading this past year, or at least a lot more reading than I usually do. So I read a lot of Ray Bradbury this year. I read a lot of poetry this year. I even read some philosophy this year. And I enjoyed most of the stuff that I read. Most of it meaning I'll get back to the stuff that I didn't like later in the video. So collectively, I probably haven't read as much as other people have read this year, but it was a lot for me given my kind of weird relationship that I have with reading. Most people, when they think about English majors, or at least what I think most people think about when they think about English majors, is they think about people who like to read a lot, who like to write a lot, who like to philosophize and sit in coffee shops while drinking black coffee and reading their Eliot and their Flaubert and their whatever. So the first day of my AP English class when I was in high school, I was randomly selected to stand up in front of the class and get interviewed by my teacher. So I went up in front of the class, and the first thing that he asked me was, well, what's your favorite book? So I said, well, I don't know about favorite book, but we had to read East of Eden over the summer last year for our homework, and I ended up really loving that book. And then a lot of people in class nodded oh yeah, I really like East of Eden too. But my teacher didn't seem very satisfied with that answer. So he asked me, well, that was a book that you were assigned for class. What's your favorite book that you've read for pleasure? And then for that question, I kind of paused and I didn't know what to say. And I was trying to think about it a lot, and it was taking me a really long time to answer. So he just said, well, what was your favorite book that you read when you were growing up? And I thought, oh, well, that's a really easy question because I hated reading when I was growing up. And he just kind of stared at me and he said, didn't your parents read to you when you were a kid? And I said, no, my parents were really busy working. So I grew up playing a lot of video games and watching a lot of TV, but yeah, I hated reading when I was a kid. And then he was like, why are you in this class? And I was thinking, well, I didn't read when I was a kid, but I loved East of Eden and I like all the books that I'm reading now, so that's why I'm in this class. And then he just told me to sit down, and then he picked the next person to go up. So after that happened, I started to really think about what kind of stuff did I read when I was a kid? Did I really not read anything as a kid? So what was my relationship with reading when I was growing up? I remember in elementary school, I did start out reading the Pokemon novels. I don't know if anyone remembers those, but it was like the entire Pokemon TV show in book form. So I read those. I hope that a lot of people read those because I checked those out at the library all the time. And then I started reading fantasy books about dragons. And then when I went to intermediate school, I read more fantasy books about dragons. And then I was always doing the required reading for school too. So I was reading throughout school and throughout my childhood, but I still wouldn't really identify myself as a reader. So after establishing that in my head, I started to think, well, what kind of books do I like? And I realized that my favorite books were just the books that we would read in class. So like East of Eden, or A Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, or The Fairy Queen, or Great Expectations, or Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I really loved all of those stories, but they were just my assigned reading in class. I really love all of those, but I never went through any kind of phase that I feel like most people do in middle school or beginning of high school, where they start reading teen fiction or young adult fiction, and they kind of have that transition phase where they go from the Pokemon books into teen fiction and young adult, and then into the literature of the Victorian period and Jane Austen. So I never read Nicholas Sparks novels, I never read Twilight, I never even read Roald Dahl or the Chronicles of Narnia. Even though I really loved fantasy, I never got into those. I just totally skipped that phase of my reading development. So once I graduated high school, the specific community college that I went to, I felt like compared to the high school that I went to, there wasn't as much stress on me to really focus down on grades. And I was a lot more encouraged to be creative and do fun things and learn through experiencing life as opposed to learn from reading your textbooks. So since I had more leisure time during that period, I thought, okay, well, why don't I try to go back and retrieve that phase that I had missed. So I decided that I would try to read a teen fiction or a young adult novel. I was thinking, well, why don't I just go for like the pinnacle of young adult fiction, like the one book and author that everyone really loves and like they cult around him. So basically, for my first young adult novel, I read John Green's The Fault in Our Stars. And I didn't like it. It was kind of like the writing style to me seemed kind of childish, like in comparison to Oscar Wilde, who I really like. And the story with the whole teen romance just seemed really cheesy to me. So I read it and I just didn't enjoy it. I'm sorry. I read The Hunger Games too, and I did like it better, but it still wasn't one of those things where I read it and then afterwards I was like, oh, wow, like that was great. I have to read the author's entire breadth of work. And I have read stories where I felt that way, where I was like, I have to read everything that this author has ever written. So I found that I really love reading now because I love good writing styles and I love witty writing styles and I like analyzing good writing and trying to figure out how and why these authors are trying to communicate really complicated issues through the mode of fiction. And while you can argue that teen authors and young adult authors also try to do that, to me, that genre just doesn't cut it for me. They're just not good as Melville. So basically, I grew up disliking to read, but I kept reading while I was growing up because of my school, and I skipped any kind of teen fiction, young adult, romance phase, and now I love the canon and I love writing about the canon. I'm unoriginal. But now that you've listened to my whole story about my relationship with reading, I have a recommendation for you. So, with it being Christmas time, and I'm sure that most of you have a lot of leisure time to do some reading, I am going to recommend this. So, this is Truman Capote. And it's not Breakfast at Tiffany's. Although Breakfast at Tiffany's is a good story, but it's not the one that I want. Usually, if you get Breakfast at Tiffany's, there's the short story, but then it comes along with 3 other short stories. So it comes with House of Flowers, it comes with a diamond guitar, and at the very end, it comes with A Christmas Memory. A Christmas Memory is my favorite short story of all time. It touches my soul in a way that no other story has ever touched my soul before. It makes me feel really sad and melancholy and nostalgic, but it also makes me incredibly happy and fulfilled, and it's just beautiful. And maybe it has that effect on me because the story is somewhat autobiographical for Truman Capote, so it has a lot of authentic emotion in it, but I really love Capote's writing style, and I think it's kind of a nice blend in that it's very simplistic, but like I said before, it's really charged with a lot of emotion. So I first read A Christmas Memory in 7th grade, and I was really happy that my teacher assigned it because it has stayed with me for a long time, and I try to read it every Christmas. So now I'm passing it along to you. So if you want to own it, it's going to be with Breakfast at Tiffany's, but it will also obviously be in like his complete works or his complete short stories. And honestly, you can find a lot of Capote's short stories online. So I'll probably find it for you myself and I'll put a link down there. So go read it, find like a quiet corner, grab some tea or coffee and just cuddle up near the fireplace or the Yule log on the TV and just read it by yourself. Just soak it all in and then afterwards go bake some fruitcakes. So I feel that this year I'm using my webcam today because I don't have my other laptop. And if I don't have my other laptop, then I can't edit anything that I record on my camcorder. And I thought everyone needs at least one webcam video. So here's my webcam video.